Welcome to this React Radio button and checkbox tutorial. Syncfusion React Radio buttons provide users with a group of options from which they can choose only one. In contrast, Syncfusion React checkboxes let users select multiple options. Each checkbox supports 3 states: checked, unchecked, and indeterminate. In this video, I will show you how to create a React app and add the Syncfusion React Radio button and checkbox components to it. I will also show you how to customize the label position, component size, rendering direction, and make the component unavailable for access. Before proceeding, make sure you have installed the latest versions of Node.js and React. I'll be using Visual Studio Code as my editor and showing the output in the Chrome browser. Let's get started with the React Radio button component. First, I open Visual Studio Code and create a React application using the npx create React app command. I name it my React app. Since I want to create the app with TypeScript, I add the template TypeScript. Next, I navigate to the newly created React app. To use the radio button component, I need to install the React Buttons package, so I run the command npm install at syncfusion/ej React Buttons --save. Before using any Syncfusion React component, I need to register a trial license key. I open the index.tsx file and import the register license method from the Syncfusion EJ2 base package. Using this method, I register the trial license key. For instructions on how to generate a trial key, refer to the link in this video's description. Next, I open the app.tsx file and remove the default code snippets. After that, I import the radio button component from the Syncfusion EJ2 React Buttons package. Next, to add CSS style references for the radio button in the app.css file, I import the material theme reference. I'm going to add radio buttons for users to select a payment method in an online transaction page. So, in the app.tsx file, I add a header tag with the value select a payment method inside a division element. Then I add 4 division elements to show 4 radio buttons. In the first division element, I add the radio button component tag. To set the button text, I add the label property and give it the value credit/debit card. To create a group that will include this button, I add the name property and give it the value payment. Similarly, I add radio buttons to the other division elements with appropriate labels. I set the name property to payment in each radio button so that when I select one radio button in the group, it automatically clears any selection of the other buttons. Next, I'll align the component. In the app.css file, I add the CSS styles margin top to 18 pixels and margin left to 40%. Now I save the changes and run the application by using the npm start command. Looking here, the React Radio buttons are rendered. Now you can choose any option from the group. To set a default selection for the component, use the checked property. To demonstrate, I set the checked property to true for the first radio button. Checking now, the first option is selected by default. Notice that each radio button's text is rendered to the right of the radio button. If you want to render the text to the left of the button, use the label position property and set it to before for all the radio buttons. See, now the text is rendered to the left of the buttons. The radio buttons can be displayed in 2 sizes, default and small. To display a small size button, set the CSS class property to eSmall. To make this example clearer, I remove the label position property. Now the size of the buttons is smaller. The default rendering direction of the radio buttons is from left to right. That is, buttons will be displayed on the left and text on the right. To render the buttons from right to left, set the Enable RTL property to true. See now, radio buttons are rendered in the right to left direction. It produces the same result as setting the label position property to before. Lastly, I will show you how to make the component unavailable to the user. I set the disabled property of the third radio button to true. See, now the cache on delivery option is disabled. Next, let's add the Syncfusion React Checkbox component to the application. The checkbox component is a part of the buttons package. Since I have already installed that, I will add the component. I import the checkbox component from the Syncfusion EJ2 React buttons package. I comment out the radio button code and add the checkbox component tag. I set the label property to default. Look here, when I click the checkbox, it is selected. To enable the checkbox by default, set the checked property to true. See, the checkbox is now already selected when it's rendered. By default, the label renders to the right of the checkbox. To change the position, set the label position property to before. You will see the label renders to the left of the checkbox. Like the radio button, the checkbox also has two sizes, default and small. To change the size to small, set the CSS class property to eSmall. I remove the label position property to make it easier to see. Now a smaller checkbox is rendered. Just like the radio button, the checkbox and its text can be rendered from right to left. To change it, set the Enable RTL property to true. Look now, the checkbox is rendered from right to left, producing the same result as when I set the label position property to before. To display the checkbox in an indeterminate state, I remove the checked property and set the indeterminate property to true. Now the checkbox is in an indeterminate state. Finally, to make the checkbox component unavailable, set the disabled property to true. See, we can no longer interact with the checkbox. In this video, I have shown you how to add the Syncfusion React radio button and checkbox components to a React app. I also showed you how to customize their label position, component size, and rendering direction, and how to make the components unavailable. If you want to try out the example used in this video, download it from the GitHub link in the video description. I have also shared a link in the description where you can learn about obtaining a free license key to use our React suite through our community license if you are eligible. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it helpful, please like it and subscribe to our channel.